The morning of March 15th, 2024, started like any other day at Kensington Palace. Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat in her private study, sunlight filtering through the tall windows as she reviewed her upcoming engagements. The carefully planned schedule lay before her: charity visits, school openings, and state functions that had become the rhythm of her royal life. But everything changed when Prince William entered the room with a letter bearing the official seal. His face carried an expression she had rarely seen in their years together, a mixture of duty and deep concern. The contents of that letter would alter the course of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The document contained news that would require them to make an impossible choice. William's military expertise was needed for a highly classified peacekeeping mission in Eastern Europe, one that could last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and his unique combination of military training and diplomatic status made him the ideal candidate to lead a delicate humanitarian operation. Catherine felt her heart sink as she read the details. This wasn't just another royal tour or ceremonial duty. This was real, dangerous work in a region where conflict had been escalating for months. The mission would require complete secrecy with limited communication to the outside world, including his own family. They spent the entire day discussing the implications. Their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, would need to be told something. But the truth was too dangerous to share completely. The royal household would need to maintain the illusion of normalcy while managing an unprecedented situation behind closed doors. As evening approached, Catherine and William walked through the gardens of Kensington Palace, their conversation heavy with unspoken fears. They had faced challenges before: public scrutiny, family tensions, and the constant pressure of royal life. But this was different. This separation would test everything they had built together. William explained that his departure would need to appear routine to avoid drawing attention to the mission. They would need to craft a public narrative that explained his temporary absence without revealing the true nature of his work. The safety of the mission, and potentially countless lives, depended on maintaining this deception. Catherine understood the weight of responsibility on her husband's shoulders. She had watched him struggle with the balance between personal desires and royal duty throughout their relationship. This decision, however, went beyond typical royal obligations. It was about using his unique position and skills to potentially save lives in a crisis situation. That night, as their children slept peacefully in their beds, Catherine and William began planning what might be their most challenging performance yet. They would need to say goodbye in a way that appeared normal to the outside world, while carrying the weight of uncertainty about. When they would see each other again, the irony wasn't lost on them. A couple whose every public moment was scrutinized and photographed would need to hide their most significant farewell in plain sight. Their goodbye would be witnessed by millions, yet its true meaning would remain invisible to all but them as they prepared for bed. Catherine noticed William studying their wedding photo on the nightstand. In it, they looked so young and hopeful, believing they could handle whatever challenges royal life would bring. Neither had imagined a test quite like this one. The next few days would be crucial in establishing the foundation for William's departure. Every public appearance, every statement, every gesture would need to serve the dual purpose of maintaining their cover while allowing them to express their true feelings in ways only they would understand. Catherine realized that her role was about to change dramatically. Not only would she need to manage her own emotions and fears, but she would also need to protect their children from the truth while supporting William's mission from afar. The strength she had developed over years of royal life would be tested in ways she never anticipated. The weight of the secret pressed down on both of them, but they knew there was no alternative. William's unique qualifications made him indispensable to the mission's success, and his participation could mean the difference between peace and further escalation in a volatile region. As they finally turned off the lights, Catherine and William held each other closer than they had in months, both acutely aware that their time together was now measured in days rather than years. Tomorrow would begin the delicate process of saying goodbye without saying goodbye, of preparing for separation. while maintaining the facade of normalcy that their roles demanded. In the days following the devastating news, Catherine and William developed an intricate system of communication that would allow them to express their deepest feelings while maintaining their public roles. They had always been masters of subtle gestures and meaningful glances. But now, these skills would serve a purpose far more critical than royal protocol, Catherine began, incorporating specific colors into her wardrobe choices that held special meaning for them. The deep blue dress she wore to a children's hospital visit was the same shade as the sapphire in her engagement, ring a reminder of their promises to each other. When William appeared beside her wearing a tie that perfectly matched, observers saw connection. Their public appearances took on new layers of significance. During a joint visit to a military base, William's speech about duty and sacrifice carried weight that only Catherine could fully understand. When she reached for his hand during the national anthem, the gesture appeared natural to onlookers. But her specific grip, 3 gentle squeezes, conveyed a message they had established years earlier. I love you.
Oh.
The couple began leaving. Subtle traces of their private conversations in public settings, William's mention of temporary assignments during interviews, held deeper meaning, while Catherine's frequent references to strength and separation and supporting those who serve became her way of acknowledging their situation without revealing it. Their photographers, unaware of the hidden drama unfolding, captured moments that would later seem prophetic. Images of Catherine looking wistfully toward the horizon during a coastal charity event, or William's unusually tender embrace after a routine engagement, documented their private struggle in plain sight. The children became unwitting participants. In their coded communication system, when William spent extra time reading bedtime stories, he chose tales about brave knights on distant quests, stories that helped him process his own upcoming journey while preparing the children for his absence. Catherine noticed his selections and began adding her own subtle reinforcements, praising characters who waited faithfully for their loved ones to return. During their final public engagement together, a charity gala for military families, their entire performance became a masterclass in hidden communication. Catherine wore jewelry that had belonged to William's mother, Diana, pieces she typically reserved for the most significant occasions. William's speech that evening focused on the sacrifices made by military spouses, his eyes finding Catherine's. Throughout his remarks, the couple danced that night with an intensity that surprised even regular royal watchers. Their movements seemed more intimate, their conversation more urgent. What observers interpreted as renewed romance was actually a goodbye disguised as celebration. Each song became a memory they were creating to sustain them through the separation. Ahead, in private moments stolen between public appearances, they refined their system further. Text messages would use seemingly innocent phrases that carried deeper meanings. Hope your meetings go well would really mean I'm thinking about the mission. The children are asking about you would signal that Catherine needed reassurance about their family's well-being. William began wearing his watch on his right wrist instead of his left, a small change that Catherine would notice in every photo or video call. It would serve as a constant reminder of their connection, visible to her even when words were impossible. She, in turn, started wearing a simple gold bracelet that spelled out their children's initials, a way of keeping their family close while maintaining the appearance of normal royal jewelry. Their friends and staff noticed changes in the couple's behavior but attributed them to typical royal stress or perhaps relationship growing pains. Nobody suspected the true reason behind William's increased focus on military matters or Catherine's sudden interest in international humanitarian law. These pursuits, which appeared to be personal interests, were actually preparation for the roles they would need to play. The palace's communication team began receiving subtle directions about upcoming schedules. They were told to prepare for William's temporary absence due to military training exercises. A cover story that would explain his disappearance without generating excessive media speculation. Catherine would maintain her full schedule, appearing strong and independent, while her husband was away. As the departure date approached, their coded messages became more frequent and more precious. A shared glance during a state dinner conveyed volumes. Catherine's choice to wear William's favorite perfume to their final public appearance together was her way of leaving him with a sensory memory that would sustain him during the lonely months ahead. The most poignant element of their communication system was its impermanence. Once William left, many of these subtle signals would become impossible. They were creating a language that would soon exist only in memory, making every gesture, every meaningful look, every carefully chosen word precious beyond measure. Their private conversations during this period took on the quality of prayers urgent. Heartfelt exchanges about hopes and fears, promises and preparations. They spoke about how to explain William's absence to the children, how to maintain their connection across dangerous distances, and how to find each other again when the mission ended. The tragedy of their situation was that their most authentic moments of love and commitment were happening under the guise of royal duty. Their most honest communication was wrapped in layers of necessary deception. Yet in some ways, this constraint was making their connection deeper, forcing them to find new ways to express feelings that had perhaps grown routine in the comfort of their established life together. The hardest part of William and Catherine's elaborate deception wasn't fooling the media or the public. It was managing their children's growing awareness that something significant was changing in their family dynamic. Had inherited his father's observational skills, while 7-year-old Charlotte possessed an emotional intelligence that often surprised adults. Even 5-year-old Louis seemed to sense the undercurrent of tension that had settled over there. Home, George was the first to notice his father's unusual behavior. During their typical evening walks around the palace gardens, William had become more philosophical, asking his eldest son about responsibility, duty, and what it meant to take care of family. These conversations, which once focused on football, scores, and school projects, now carried weight that made George feel older than his years. "Papa, why do you keep asking if I'll take care of Mama and Charlotte and Louis?" George asked one evening as they fed the palace swans. His directness caught William off guard, reminding him how perceptive his son had become. William knelt down to George's eye level, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups have important jobs that take them away for a while, and that happens. The people left behind need to support each other." He paused, watching his son's face process this information. "You're becoming a young man, George. I want to make sure you understand how important your family is." Charlotte, meanwhile, had begun expressing her concerns through art. Her recent drawings showed families with one parent colored in lighter strokes, as if that person was fading away. When Catherine discovered these pictures in Charlotte's schoolbooks, her heart nearly broke. Her daughter's subconscious was already preparing for her father's absence. Catherine decided to address Charlotte's feelings directly during one of their mother-daughter tea parties in the palace nursery. "I notice your drawings have been different lately, sweetheart. Would you like to tell me about them?" Charlotte stirred her pretend tea thoughtfully. "Sometimes I dream that Papa has to go on a very long trip, like the princes in my storybooks. But in the stories, they always come back." She looked up at her mother with eyes that seemed too wise for her age. "Real papas always come back too, don't they, Mama?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Catherine pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Papa loves us more than anything in the world, Charlotte. Sometimes love means doing difficult things, but it never means stopping loving your family." Louis, the youngest, expressed his concerns through behavior rather than words. He had started following his father everywhere, clinging to William's leg during meetings and insisting on sleeping in his parents' bedroom. His separation anxiety was becoming noticeable to palace staff, who attributed it to a typical phase of childhood development. One morning, William found Louis in his study, sitting in the large leather chair and pretending to write important documents. "I'm doing Papa's work," Louis announced proudly, scribbling on official-looking papers with a crayon. "When Papa goes away, I'll do all his jobs." The innocence of this statement devastated William. Lifted his youngest son onto his lap, suddenly aware of how small and fragile Louis felt in his arms. "You don't need to do my jobs, little man. Your only job is to be 5 years old and to help Mama with Charlotte and George." Catherine and William realized they needed to prepare their children more deliberately for the upcoming separation. Began incorporating stories about brave family members who went on important missions into their bedtime routines. They spoke about historical figures who had to leave their families temporarily to help others, emphasizing themes of courage, sacrifice, and eventual reunion. The couple also started establishing new family traditions that could continue in William's absence. Sunday morning pancakes became Catherine's specialty instead of William's. Family movie nights were restructured so that Catherine could manage the technical setup that William typically handled. These small changes were presented as fun variations, but they served the deeper purpose of helping the children, just to their mother taking on additional responsibilities. George began asking more pointed questions about his father's military background. Papa, when you were a helicopter pilot, did you ever have to go places where Mama couldn't come? His curiosity about William's past service seemed to intensify, as if he was trying to understand the patterns of duty that might explain current changes. William used these conversations to explain concepts of service and sacrifice in age-appropriate terms. He spoke about how sometimes people with special skills are called upon to help others, even when it means being away from their own families. He emphasized that such service was temporary and that the love holding families together was permanent. Charlotte had begun creating elaborate scenarios during playtime where toy families were separated and reunited. Her dolls acted out long journeys and joyful homecomings with increasing frequency. Catherine recognized these games as her daughter's way of processing fears and hopes about their family's future. The children's bedtime prayers began including requests for Papa's work to go well and for their family to stay together in their hearts, even when they're apart. These innocent petitions, spoken in sleepy voices, revealed how deeply they sensed the approaching change. Even without understanding its nature, William started leaving small surprises for his children to discover after he would be gone. Notes hidden in their school bags, treats in their favorite hiding spots, and recordings of bedtime stories that Catherine could play in his absence. Each surprise was dated for future discovery, creating a way for him to maintain its presence in their daily lives even from a distance. The family's evening routine evolved to include longer hugs, more detailed conversations about each person's day, and increased emphasis on expressing love verbally. What appeared to be a positive development in their family communication was actually preparation for a time when such expressions would become precious and rare. Catherine watched her children navigate these changes with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Their resilience amazed her, but she also recognized the burden they were unconsciously accepting. They were learning to be brave without understanding why bravery was necessary. Preparing for separation without knowing separation was coming. The Commonwealth Day service at Westminster. Abby was selected as William and Catherine's final public appearance together before his departure. Though none of the thousands in attendance could have guessed the significance of what they were witnessing. The ancient cathedral, steeped in centuries of royal history, would become the stage for the most emotionally charged performance of their royal careers. Catherine had chosen her outfit with meticulous care. The deep navy coat dress was elegant and appropriate for the occasion, but its true significance lay in details invisible to casual observers. The fabric was the same shade as the flight suit William had worn during their first meeting after his helicopter training, a private reminder of beginnings as they faced their ending. The sapphire and diamond earrings had been a gift from William on their first wedding anniversary, carrying the inscription "Forever." Whatever may come on their hidden backs, William's morning had been spent in quiet preparation, reviewing his notes for the service while stealing glances at his wife, getting ready. He had practiced his reading from the scriptures dozens of times, but today the words about faith sustaining people through trials carried personal weight that threatened to break his composure. The passage about being strong and courageous seemed specifically chosen for their situation, though it had been selected months earlier as part of the standard liturgy. As their car approached Westminster Abbey, Catherine reached for William's hand, a gesture that appeared natural to photographers, but served as a final moment of private connection before they stepped into their public roles. Her fingers traced the familiar contours of his wedding ring, a tactile reminder of vows that would soon be tested by circumstances. Neither had anticipated on their wedding day, The procession into the abbey was watched by millions around the world, but Catherine felt isolated in a bubble of hyper-awareness. Every step seemed significant, every moment precious. She noticed details that would normally escape her attention, the way morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, the sound of their footsteps on ancient stones, the subtle scent of incense that always filled the sacred space. During the service, their behavior created a masterpiece of hidden communication. When William delivered his reading about courage in the face of uncertainty, his eyes found Catherine's at specific moments, conveying messages that only she could interpret. His emphasis on certain phrases, particularly "though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil," carried personal meaning that made Catherine's heart race. The hymns took on new significance as their voices joined the congregation. "Abide with Me" had always been one of their favorites. But today, the lyrics about remaining faithful through life's changes seemed prophetic. Catherine's soprano voice harmonized with William's baritone in a way that felt like musical prayer, their combined voices creating something beautiful even as they prepared for separation. During the prayers, Catherine and William knelt side by side, their shoulders touching in the only physical contact protocol allowed during the service. In that moment, surrounded by hundreds of people, they found a pocket of intimacy that felt sacred beyond the religious setting. Their whispered amens synchronized perfectly, as if they were breathing together one final time. The Archbishop's sermon about service, sacrifice, seemed written specifically for their situation. His words about being called to purposes greater than ourselves and trusting in divine providence during times of separation resonated so deeply that Catherine wondered if somehow he knew their secret. William's focused attention during the sermon was noted by royal watchers as unusual devotion, when in reality, he was absorbing every word as guidance for the journey ahead. The moment that would later be analyzed frame by royal commentators came during the peace greeting. As tradition required, William and Catherine turned to each other to exchange the ritual handshake and blessing, but their embrace lasted several seconds longer than protocol suggested, and William's whispered words, "Until we meet again," were captured by lip readers and later misinterpreted as a romantic sentiment rather than a genuine farewell. As the service concluded and they prepared to leave the abbey, Catherine felt the weight of finality settling over her. This was their last moment as a complete family unit in public view. Every photographer capturing their exit was unknowingly documenting the end of an era in their marriage, though the beginning of their separation would remain invisible to outside observers. The receiving line after the service became an exercise in emotional discipline. Catherine and William greeted Commonwealth dignitaries, religious leaders, and other members of the royal family with their usual warmth and professionalism. While internally processing the magnitude of what lay ahead, each handshake, each polite conversation, each smile felt performative in a way that their royal duties had never felt before. The children, who had attended the service with their usual mixture of good behavior and restless energy, seemed to sense something special about the day. George stood straighter during the hymns. Charlotte held Catherine's hand more tightly than usual, and Louis stayed closer to his father throughout the entire ceremony. Their instinctive response to the emotional undercurrent proved once again how perceptive children can be, even when they don't understand what they're sensing. The drive back to Kensington Palace was filled with a different quality of silence than their journey to the Abbey. They had completed their final public performance together, and now they faced the private reality of William's imminent departure. The cheering crowds who had lined the streets to wave at their passing car had no idea they were witnessing the end of a chapter in the royal family's story. That evening, as they reviewed footage of the service on the news, Catherine and William saw their farewell through the world's eyes. A routine royal engagement carried out with their typical grace and dignity. Only they knew they were watching the documentation of one of the most significant days of their lives, a goodbye disguised as just another day of royal duty. The morning of William's departure arrived with deceptive normalcy. Spring sunlight filtered through the curtains of their bedroom at Kensington Palace, where Catherine lay awake listening to her husband's steady breathing. knowing it would be months before she would hear that sound again. She had been awake since 4 o'clock, memorizing the rhythm of his sleep. The way his hand rested on her shoulder, the familiar warmth of his presence beside her. William's official schedule for the day showed a routine series of military briefings and training exercises, a carefully constructed cover story that would explain his absence from public view while maintaining operational security. The real timeline, known only to a handful of senior officials, called for his departure from RAF Northolt at precisely 6:30 p.m. Under cover of what appeared to be a standard military transport flight, their private goodbye began before dawn. In the quiet sanctuary of their bedroom, where no cameras could intrude and no protocol could dictate their behavior, they spoke in whispers, sharing fears they couldn't voice to anyone else, making promises they weren't certain they could keep, exchanging assurances that felt both necessary and insufficient for the separation ahead Catherine had prepared. A small package for William to discover once his mission began, letters to be opened on specific dates, photographs of the children that wouldn't compromise security, and a recording of their wedding vows that he could listen to when doubt crept in. William had left similar surprises for her, hidden throughout their private quarters to be found during the lonely weeks ahead. The children's morning routine proceeded with carefully maintained normalcy. William helped with breakfast, assisted with school preparations, and engaged in the typical parental negotiations about clothing choices and homework completion. But his hugs lasted longer than usual, and his attention seemed more focused, as if he was trying to capture every detail of these ordinary family moments. George had developed a habit of asking his father about various what-if scenarios. What if there was an emergency at school? What if Louis got sick? What if Mama needed help with something important? These questions revealed the 9-year-old's growing awareness that his father's availability was becoming uncertain. Though he couldn't articulate why he felt compelled to establish these contingency plans, Charlotte had been unusually clingy all morning, insisting that William braid her hair for school, something he had never done before and struggled with adorably. Her request seemed random, but Catherine recognized it as her daughter's instinctive need to create one more memory with her father, one more shared experience to carry with her during his absence. The afternoon brought William's stage departure for what palace staff believed was a routine military training exercise. His personal protection officers had been briefed on the cover story and prepared for an absence of undetermined length. Even they didn't know the true nature of his mission, only that it involved classified work requiring complete operational resources. Security Catherine accompanied William to the palace courtyard for what appeared to be a standard farewell, the kind of goodbye they had exchanged hundreds of times before when duty called one of them away from home. Their embrace was warm but brief, their conversation casual, their demeanor suggesting nothing more significant than a husband leaving for a business trip. But beneath this performance, they engaged in their final exchange of coded messages. Catherine's seemingly casual adjustment of William's collar was actually her way of straightening a small pin hidden beneath his lapel, a miniature version of her engagement ring that would remain close to his heart throughout his mission. William's kiss on her forehead, lingering just a moment longer than usual, was his way of blessing her with the strength she would need to carry their family through the challenging months ahead. The children had been prepared for their father's departure with the same cover story given to staff. Papa had important military training that would keep him away for a while, but he would stay in touch and return as soon as possible. Their goodbyes were heartfelt but not dramatic, designed to seem routine while carrying deeper meaning for all involved. As William's official car pulled away from Kensington Palace, Catherine maintained her composure until the vehicle disappeared from view. Then she allowed herself exactly 3 minutes of private grief before returning to her role as mother, princess, and temporary single parent. The children needed consistency, the palace staff needed leadership, and the public needed confidence that the royal family remained strong and united. The journey to RAF Northolt was surreal for William, who found himself simultaneously reviewing mission parameters and remembering Catherine's laugh from that morning's breakfast. His phone contained the last text messages he would be able to send to his family for an indefinite period, casual notes about loving them and looking forward to returning home that carried weight far beyond their simple words. At the military, Boss William's transformation from prince to soldier was swift and complete. His civilian clothes were replaced with combat fatigues. His royal protection detail was replaced with military security. And his identity as Catherine's husband and the children's father was subsumed into his role as a military operative on a classified mission. The final phone call to Catherine came from a secure line at the base, ostensibly to confirm his safe arrival at training headquarters. Their conversation was brief and monitored, limited to expressions of love that sounded routine but carried the weight of goodbye. Catherine's voice remained steady as she assured him that all was well at home, though her hands shook as she held the phone. As William's transport plane lifted off into the darkening sky, he watched London's lights disappear below, knowing that each mile of distance represented another layer of separation from everything he loved most. The mission briefing spread across his lap detailed the challenges ahead, but his thoughts remained focused on the family he was leaving behind and the promise he had made to return to them safely. Catherine stood at their bedroom window that evening, looking out at the empty courtyard where William's car had departed hours earlier. The space looked exactly as it had that morning, but everything had changed. She was now carrying the full weight of their shared responsibilities alone, protecting their children's innocence while managing her own fears about William's safety and the uncertain duration of their separation. The palace settled into its evening routine with no indication that one of its primary residents might not return for months or possibly longer. Only Catherine knew that their carefully constructed life had been fundamentally altered, that their marriage was about to face its greatest test, and that their family's future now depended on the success of a mission she could never fully understand or support. 3 weeks into William's absence, Catherine had established a new rhythm of life that looked seamless from the outside but required tremendous emotional discipline to maintain. Her public schedule had actually increased to compensate for William's missing engagements, and she threw herself into these duties with an intensity that impressed even veteran royal watchers. What they interpreted as renewed vigor was actually her way of channeling anxiety and loneliness into productive action. The children had adjusted too, their father's absence with the remarkable resilience of youth, but their coping mechanisms revealed the depth of their feelings. George had become more protective of his younger siblings and more helpful to his mother, taking on a seriousness that seemed beyond his years. Charlotte expressed her emotions through increasingly elaborate artwork that filled their refrigerator, with images of families connected by rainbows, stars, and invisible threads. Louis had begun carrying a small toy helicopter everywhere, claiming it was a message system to his father in the sky. Communication with William came through carefully, orchestrated channels that maintained operational security while providing essential family connection. Official family updates were transmitted through military communications networks, disguised as routine personnel reports. Personal messages were embedded within seemingly mundane palace administrative documents, with Catherine's expressions of love hidden within scheduling updates and household management reports. The coded system they had developed before his departure proved invaluable. Catherine's social media posts, carefully monitored by royal communications staff, contained subtle messages that only William would recognize. A photograph of the children playing in the palace gardens included Charlotte wearing the blue dress she had worn on their last day together, a signal to William that they were maintaining their connection to him. Her choice to wear specific jewelry pieces during public appearances sent messages about her emotional state and the children's well-being. William's responses came through equally creative channels. Intelligence reports from his mission area, heavily redacted for security reasons, occasionally contained references to weather patterns, geographical features, or local customs that held personal meaning for Catherine. She learned to read these official documents like love letters, finding reassurance in phrases that confirmed his safety and his continued love for their family. The most challenging aspect of their separation was managing the children's growing questions about their father's prolonged absence. George had begun researching military training exercises online, trying to understand why his father's assignment was lasting so much longer than typical programs. His questions became increasingly sophisticated, revealing his awareness that something unusual was happening, though he couldn't quite identify what felt different. Charlotte's emotional needs expressed themselves through increased clinginess, with her mother and elaborate bedtime rituals that included leaving drawings for her father to find when he returned. She had created an entire series of Papa's homecoming pictures that covered every surface of her bedroom, each one showing slightly different scenarios for their reunion, but all featuring the same theme of joy and celebration Louis had developed: an imaginary friendship with Papa's voice, conducting elaborate conversations with empty air that broke Catherine's heart, while also revealing his remarkable emotional intelligence. His made-up dialogues included updates about school, questions about the mission, expressions of love that suggested he understood far more about their situation than his age should have allowed. Catherine found herself becoming expert at reading between the lines of official communications about William's mission. The carefully neutral language of military reports couldn't completely hide indicators of success or setbacks, and she learned to interpret bureaucratic phrases as emotional intelligence about her husband's well-being and the progress of his work. The support system that surrounded Catherine during this period was both comprehensive and carefully managed. Senior palace staff had been briefed on the need for additional assistance without being given details about the true nature of William's absence. Friends and family members noticed her increased independence but attributed it to natural growth in her royal role, rather than necessity born from separation. Catherine's relationship with her children deepened during this period in unexpected ways. Without William's presence to share parenting responsibilities, she became more attuned to each child's individual needs and communication styles. George's tendency toward serious conversations reminded her of William at that age, while Charlotte's artistic expression became a bridge for emotional discussions that might otherwise have been difficult to navigate. The public's perception of Catherine during this period was unanimously positive. Her increased visibility and confident handling of solo engagements was interpreted as evidence of her growing comfort in her royal role. Media coverage praised her independence and strength, never suspecting that these qualities were being tested by circumstances far more challenging than typical royal duties. 5 weeks into the separation, Catherine received the first direct communication from William since his departure, a brief, encrypted message confirming his safety and expressing his love for their family. The message, transmitted through secure military channels and delivered by a royal protection officer, contained only a few sentences, but each word was precious beyond measure. William's message included specific references that proved he was receiving their coded communications, mentions of Charlotte's latest artwork, pride in George's increased maturity, and amusement at Louis's helicopter obsession. These details, insignificant to anyone else, served as proof that their connection remained strong despite the physical distance and communication barriers. The uncertainty about the mission's duration continued to be the most challenging aspect of their separation. Catherine had been told to prepare for William's absence to last anywhere from 3 months to 2 years, depending on developments in the region where he was working. This ambiguity made it impossible to establish concrete expectations or timelines, requiring her to maintain hope while preparing for extended separation. As spring turned toward summer, Catherine found herself developing new strengths and discovering capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. Her confidence in solo parenting grew, her comfort with increased public responsibilities expanded, and her ability to manage complex emotional situations improved dramatically. While she desperately missed her husband, she also began to recognize her own remarkable resilience and capacity for growth, the love that connected. William and Catherine across the distance evolved during this period, becoming less dependent on daily interaction and more rooted in fundamental trust and commitment. Their relationship was being tested in ways they never could have imagined, but it was also being refined and strengthened by the very challenges that threatened to divide them. Each day of successful separation proved the durability of their bond, while each coded message confirmed that physical distance could not diminish the connection they had built together.